call Ian McKelvey.
Speaker got it right this time. It's a pleasure to get up and take a call on the electronic monitoring of offenders legislation. That's not what I meant to, Bill. The bill, Mr Speaker, removes legislative barriers to electronic monitoring of offenders released from imprisonment or sentences of 2 years or less, and offenders sentenced to intensive supervision. I want to talk a bit about one or two of the comments that have been made around the House tonight, because I think it's interesting that I think every party in the House supports this bill in one form or another, and I think some of the points made, particularly by Catherine Delahunty, are quite interesting. And some of the challenges that the Select Committee is going to have as it gets this bill, or puts this bill through its paces, so to speak, will be interesting. And I guess if you look at the electronic monitoring, it is something that's relatively new to the world, but to New Zealand. And it's something that we need to test in all sorts of communities. And one of the challenges that the Select Committee will have is understanding how this might work in remote parts of rural New Zealand, where, of course, we don't have the same types of connectivity that they have in their cities. That'll be one of the issues that of course affects it, and the other one will be the remoteness of some of those locations and the place that some of these people choose to live. But there are some significant advantages to this bill. I guess if you look at it in the broadest possible manner, it's supposed to, and will do, I'm sure, assist the lot of victims, and that it will keep a much better track on the people who have committed crimes, and it will ensure that the victim, it'll hopefully ensure that the victim is protected from those people where necessary. I think it will also make a difference to the rehabilitation of those people who are the beneficiaries of this electronic monitoring, because it's quite clear from the results of the last few years that everything we do in corrections to improve the reintroduction of prisoners or people who have committed crimes into our community makes a difference to how they, I guess, react, and also makes a difference to the success rate of reintroducing them. And the government's had some pretty significant success in this area in the last few years, and I think it was David Clendon talked about visiting a Rumataka prison a couple of weeks ago, and it was a really very interesting visit, and I'd had the good fortune or otherwise to visit that prison a few years before with a previous Select Committee, and it was really interesting to watch even the changes that had happened in the 2 or 3 years since we'd been there last, and there's some pretty amazing things happening in our corrections service. And I think the retraining, the work that's done around drug and alcohol counselling, the work that's done with violent offenders, and David Clendon did mention the progress that was made at Rumataka in dealing with, and we did get to talk to a couple of those people who'd been through the program. It was pretty amazing the result they'd got with those two, and I hope that I hope they weren't unusual, and that result is able to be achieved with more people than just that. There's obviously all the work around the release to work, and I get that's where this electronic monitoring comes in to some extent, because the release to work enables these people to be released, and the prison service or the corrections service to keep a track of them and understands what's going on. It also protects those prisoners to some extent, because it does protect them from, I guess, making the same mistakes twice. Well, hopefully it does anyway. The other thing that I've found really interesting in the corrections service is the way the parole hearings have changed, and the way they pay so much attention to, I guess, where the prisoners who are being released on parole are going to be released to, how they're released, where they're going to live, where they're going to work, and what they're going to do when they are not working. And it's a very good process, and I think we're making some really good progress in that area. And actually, it's led to a significant change in the number of reoffenders we have. Since 2011, some 1,850 less reoffenders than we'd had prior to that stage. The stabilising of the prison population. I think there's a muster or a population of about 8,600 in prison right now, which is a pretty good result. That figure in 2008 was estimated to be 10,500 by this stage. So clearly at that time, there was a significant increase in the number of people going to prison and the number of people committing crimes. We've of course had some significant drop in the number of crimes being committed to, and I'll get onto that in a few minutes.
I can't wait.
We'll be very good, Mr Bishop, we'll be very good. And in fact, as I said a minute ago, we were up in the Hutt Valley just last week or the week before, inspecting some of that work that's being done by the Corrections Department.
Part of the country.
There wasn't a lot of sun there. Mr Speaker, the government's passed in the last few years a lot of law to I guess it's, and to some extent it's playing around the edges a little bit, but that's where we're at with this stuff, and the more small adjustments we can make to legislation that impact positively on both victims and the prisoners, the better off we'll be. And I can think of the parole amendment bill, and particularly the bail amendment bill in the last year or two that have had a significant impact, particularly on victims. Speaker, the government has a better public services program in place, and some very ambitious targets have been set to be achieved by June 2017. And this goes a long way towards, I guess, achieving what we've been talking about with respect to the electronic monitoring of offenders legislation bill. By 2017, we're hoping to have 600 less prisoners, 4,000 fewer community reconvictions, and 18,500 less victims of crime. If that can be achieved, Mr Speaker, there's some significant progress being made. That's an overall reduction in reoffending of some 25%. And of course, this bill goes a little way to assist the Corrections Department to, I guess, lessen the amount of reoffending that goes on. And I think that's really positive from our perspective, very positive for the government, and it's got to be good for New Zealand. The effect of the bills, as I said earlier, are twofold really, in that they give more protection to victims, they enhance the opportunity for offenders to, I guess, be successfully reintegrated into society and to successfully find, I guess, work and a place they can live where they're not tempted to get back into their old ways. Penny Hiranari, in his talk on this bill, talked of this issue, and he also accused the government of failing to spend enough on rehabilitation. Well, I take him up on that, because I think the government's doing a great job with respect to rehabilitation of prisoners, and there's so many programs in place, there are so many opportunities for us to get prisoners both trained, as Jackie Dean said earlier, both trained while they're in prison, and consequently when they're trained to work, they can then get and find gainful employment, I guess, when they leave a prison. And in my electorate, the Rangitikei, I have obviously the Linton prison, which has about 260 odd prisoners, and very close to my boundary is the Wanganui prison, which has about 500. All came from somewhere else, of course. But the thing about Wanganui is they have a number of programs where they're training people in nursery, concrete work, all sorts of stuff like that. And it makes a big difference to these people, and they can get out and get jobs either in timber mills or with roading contractors in the district. And for them to get out, be able to do that, so they get out and work while they're in prison, or they're released to work, and then they get released to work, and these monitoring systems, if necessary, can be utilised at that point. So, Mr Speaker, I think that this bill has got a lot to offer the people that it concerns. It will be very interesting to see it go through the Select Committee process, because there are a number of, even in a small bill like this, there are a number of issues that will arise during the course of the Select Committee process, and a number of them have been raised around the House tonight, so they've done a pretty good job of that. I just want to comment on one other thing, Mr Speaker, and that's the Ministers of Corrections. And I think our current Minister of Corrections is doing a great job. But interestingly, in the House, I think there's probably 6 Ministers of Corrections. You could kind of have an old boy or old girl society of Ministers of Corrections. And I noticed one over the back, in the back row on the other side. He's probably forgotten he was the Minister of Corrections. But it's obviously a pretty important role. So Mr Speaker, with those few words, I have a great deal of pleasure in commending this bill to the House, and look forward to the process as it goes through.